With the Sunday school study in the book of Judges. Of course, chronologically, Joshua's era ends and the book of Judges, the historical accounts of Judges, pick right up. So they're kind of end to end, following the, following the land's conquering, I suppose. You want to push start on that?
I did.
You did? Okay. Well, see, you beat me to it. Yeah, I snuck around. All right. Last time we took a look at this book last week when we were privileged to be in it, we ended with the account of Caleb. Of course, he was one of the original spies that 38 and a half years before had gone into the land to spy it out at Kadesh Barnea, and then had spent that 38 and a half years watching his entire peer group die. For all practical purposes, that's every time he went to a funeral, he was reminded of the repercussions of disobedience and a lack of faith. God had promised that he'd drive them out, and under Joshua, as they crossed the Jordan, went into the promised land and did those southern and then northern campaigns militarily, everything that goes with it. Then Caleb comes and says, "You promised me a portion at Kadesh Barnea all these years ago." He said, "I want a life of ease. I've signed up for Social Security. I'm on the government dole. I want to put my feet up. I've got a big screen color TV ordered from Walmart, and I'm ready to coast from here on." And it doesn't seem to be the case, does it? Seems like he kind of picks out the one of the most troubled hot spots that is yet to conquer in the promised land, a place that is populated by the Anakim, the giants. One of the family, we often think of Goliath. Goliath was off from Gath down in Philistia, but probably a related group. And we have a man that is, we would say, at least somewhat advanced in years, ready to take on yet even another task. He still had his health, and he wanted to continue to serve. And certainly there's a lesson there for so many that we have. When we come then with that particular segment of study there in the last portion of chapter 14, we found that brought to conclusion the record of the 2.5 tribes. It's kind of a disjointed type of description of inheriting the promised land, the apportionment, how the geography was then carved up. And you remember the 2.5 tribes had determined to stay east of the Jordan River, and they had, however, sent men for the military to assist with the conquering of the west side territory of the Jordan into Israel, or the promised land proper, so to speak. And now you have a record of the land being apportioned, and it was done by lot. We talked about this last time. We'll talk about it a little more in a few moments. But you have what amounts to, as I mentioned this morning, it's kind of like reading a real estate deed, okay? That portion of the quarter subsection beginning at Township 46 East and running to blah, 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 and you get down to what, who, what, and it's almost the way it is, okay? However, interspersed with a lot of that, there are some little cameos that I think are worth some consideration for us. I don't get bogged down in all the legal description, okay? You've got from chapter 15 clear through chapter 19 or something like that. You have 4, 5, 6 chapters of nothing but description of the borders of this land joining the borders of that land. And if you want to sit down and map all that out, you've got my blessing. You really do. My blessing is worth essentially nothing. But if you feel God is leading you to do that, then you will have God's blessing, and that is worth something. So go for it. That's terrific. It really is. It's one of those things that that I find my time, and as far as this class goes, I'm going to trust your time, better spent by looking at some of the cameos in the overall picture and not getting bogged down with all the detail of which side of which rock next to which mountain, that you and I would have a hard time even figuring out what part of Israel it's actually in and what's the significance anyway. And everybody goes, I don't know and don't care. So it is important to the nation of Israel. This is the promised land. If you're Jewish, you can trace your tribe, family, clan, and so forth back into this environment, and you can find where your eternal inheritance is. So yeah, this is significant for them. I'm not so sure there's any premium significance for you and I, except to recognize that God had promised this to Israel. It was their eternal inheritance, and what he's given them, he will bring about on a conclusive basis, even yet in the future, with the restoration of Israel to the land during the millennial age yet to come, and so forth, everything that goes with it. So you have 9.5 tribes as we open up chapter 15. And with that 9.5 tribes getting their portions, you remember how it has been suggested, and it is kind of stated this way when we peel down the 9.5 down to 7. Okay, and I'm not going to explain that right now. We'll get to it in a few minutes. But what has been recorded in Jewish history is that there were descriptions of the land that were written down and placed in one pot, okay, and then there were the names of the remaining tribes placed in another pot, and at the same exact moment and command from Joshua, there was a description of a portion of the land and a tribal name drawn, and those two went together. This, of course, was to eliminate any charge of favoritism or being buddies with Joshua or having the inside track to getting the best portion or whatever it happened to be. So you have a description of Judah that goes down through beginning in chapter 15, and there are just a couple of significant things. It talks about kind of an interesting thing when you get to verse 8, the valley of the son of Hinnom. Okay? It talks about at the end of that valley was the valley of the giants. So apparently there were a group of these large Goliath individuals that had a residential presence there. Okay, now that doesn't mean much to us, this valley of Hinnom thing. The valley of Hinnom is right, it would be on the southwest corner of Jerusalem proper. It was the garbage dump for the city of Israel. It was the downhill side, which you stop and think about it makes sense, because if you don't want your water sources contaminated, you don't dump your garbage on the uphill side. But it was a rather sharp cleft that went into the ground, and they would take their garbage down there, the whole city's worth, the crews, and dump it, into that valley. Okay, there you get, when Jesus talked about, where the fires is never extinguished and the worm dieth not. Okay, that's the valley of Hinnom. That is, and the way they control that. And you say, well, what do they do when all the garbage builds up? Well, they just threw a match in it and let it burn. And it basically burned for, according to Jewish historians, about 250 years. Smoldered along, flared up, smoldered along, flared up. The EPA would have had heart attacks, over the whole thing. But they had it figured out. The prevailing wind blew this way and this and that and everything, and it worked. But they dumped everything down there. If you couldn't afford a tomb, a grave site, when you croaked, they just took your body on the cart and took it down, dumped it in there too. And so where the worm dieth not is a reference to the decay of the human state after it has died. They're talking about bodies being consumed by maggots and other worms. Okay, and the fires continue to burn. It's a picture of hell. Okay, it's a picture of the perpetual state, okay, of the lake of fire. And that's where that's where Jesus pulled it out of Jewish history and put it into effect. So it's kind of interesting to see, these little bits and pieces that come together. Now, when you get to verse 13 of chapter 15, all of a sudden you have Caleb pops back into the picture. Okay, there's a lot of weird names here that I have no problem mispronouncing glibly, so I will go ahead and read some of them for you. And unto Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, he gave a part among the children of Judah. Okay, Judah's inheritance on the west side, kind of down quite a ways, very big geographically. You can look at a map sometime. Kent had some out here for Sunday school a while back. According to the commandment of the Lord to Joshua, the city of Arba, the father of Anak, which is the city of Hebron. This is Anak, the Anakim, the giants. Okay, this is what Caleb was going after that we looked at last week. Okay, and Caleb drove thence the three sons of Anak, Shishai and Ahiman and Timai, the children of Anak. And he went up thence to the inhabitants of Debir, and the name of Debir before was Kirjathsepher. Let me just give you a little hint. When you're asked to read a portion and you run into these names, just don't stutter. Because nobody else knows how to pronounce them either, really, And even my professors at seminary would argue about how you pronounce some of this stuff. They couldn't agree back and forth. They don't know either. It's 2,000 years ago how some of these place names and people names were pronounced correctly, and they were probably morphed even then. So, Kent, yeah.
It seems like, and I've never taken the time, well, I'm lazy, so I haven't looked it up. That's the truth. But Kirjath or Kiryath, or depends on how they spell it in whatever book, whatever translation you've got. That's got to be city of something.
City of.
Because we just read before about Kiryath Arba, and we now know who Arba is.
Yeah.
And this is Kirjathsepher, and I don't know, I forget who Sepher is.
Yeah, city of. Yeah, and a lot of the time in the Jewish, that's the way they identified it. See, a lot of names are like that when you stop and think about it. All right. It's you know anybody? You probably don't, but I'll just pick some out. You've got Bob Haymaker. Guess what his family background was at some point in the past? Okay, Hayden. Somebody in my past, probably Scotland, stored hay in a cave someplace, and he was known as the guy who stored hay in a den. So he became, Roger of Hayden. Underhill, Overstreet, Overbrook. You can just pick, and any of the carpenter, any of the, stuff like shoemaker, and things like that. You can Smiths. Anybody with any Smith in their name was some type of a Smith at some point. Well, as Ken has pointed out, you've got the same thing going on here. They didn't have these long, windy names. They gave place identifying names to give you, because there were 16 Bobs out there. You needed to know which one did the hay, which one was a blacksmith, which one was a baker, which one, because otherwise it could be pretty confusing if you just said, well, Bob. Yeah, which one? So they came up with a name that helped out. Well, same thing here. You had men that were the rulers of or associated with a place, in this case, a city, a town, a village, and that became an associative thing. So everything that goes with it. Verse 16 says, Caleb said, now here it, again, relate back to the previous chapter, he that smites Kirjathsepher and takes it, to him will I give Achsah my daughter to wife. I'm waiting for the ruffles to come up on you ladies out there and for you to get hostile. You know, would you really like your father putting you on the trophy block? Hmm? I mean, that's really, he said, yeah, hey, man, you got some stud out there with a lot of testosterone and he's really good with spears and swords. You know, whoever comes out on top, can go ahead and sweep this damsel, off to be his wife. And the girl, I'm thinking, said, whoa, Pop, hold it just a minute here, will you? I mean, is Feminism 101 going to charge to the forefront here or not? Well, no, it's not. Now, you can't read between the lines. There's a tremendous amount of speculation, but where are you going to go with this? Krista?
That's just the way they did things back then.
A lot of the time it was a cultural situation. On top of that, this was a smart move by Caleb. You want to cement a military prowess into your family environment to be able to hold your section of land, then you want the stud of the week on your side. You want this guy who knows how to sharpen the spears and run them through body parts and stuff like that, because this guy is going to be a serious asset, because Caleb's starting to put on a few years at this point, and he's worried about his kids and his grandkids and the security of his part of the land. It's really nice to know that you've got a guy who can defend, and take out the creepos if necessary when they raise their heads there. So it's not entirely stupid. However, I have to admit, it still doesn't address, the romantic side, we have one in the back. Yes, all right.
No, if you read on, it says more about her, and honestly, my reading is that she probably wanted to do this because she's a real go-getter.
Yeah.
She's like, okay, I want the guy who's like most able to get me lots of land and keep it, and then give me springs of water, and then we're just
and then this, and then this, and okay, Pop, you're gonna, exactly.
I feel like there was some poking, like, hey dad.
Yeah. This gal is not. This gal. Yeah, she is not a church mouse. You get that picture from her, and Corey put it exactly right. Othniel, the son of Kenaz, the brother of Caleb, took it and gave him Achsah, the daughter, to wife. It came to pass as she came that she moved him to ask of her father. He said, no time at all. She's putting the screws to her brand new hubby and saying, you need to move over there. And while Caleb is feeling good about this whole conquering the land thing, and getting this giant thing taken care of and everything else down there, let's see if we can maneuver a little Lagresse out of him here. Let's go ahead and work at this. Well, you're talking about people here, folks. Sometimes we don't realize, sometimes we look at this and we think, oh, they've all got golden halos floating around. No, they don't. They're people. They have to function in a real world, and she is a very, obviously, I believe, my conclusion is she's a very practical woman. And she's looking out. She said, okay, this is the way it's going to be. I'm going to make the best of it. And what does she ask for? She says, ask for a field. And she lighted off her donkey. Caleb said to her, what would you? She says, I want blessings. I want the south land. I want springs of water. I want the upper springs. I want the nether spring. She's tying up water rights throughout the land. And folks, in that country, water rights are a big deal. Okay? When I was a kid growing up in this dinky little community I was in, we had farmers and ranchers that got into fistfights over water rights. I mean, serious. I mean, it was, 20 years before, they'd have been out there on Main Street with their peacemakers blazing away at each other, but at this time, they got into fistfights. Yes, ma'am.
Rush Creek has always been notorious for their water fights. And there's been fisticuffs and bolt guns and stuff up there.
Guns and
Threats and
Nobody
all
wants
kinds.
to be water master up there.
Yeah, it's kind of like being a medic. It's you've got a life expectancy of 12 seconds. Anyway.
sometime when you have a couple hours, I'll tell you a story about that.
Yeah, I imagine there are. So it talks about, again, this kind of a very personal cameo of this young woman who seems to be just offered on the altar of some type of convenient thing for gaining land, but she kind of turns the table on the whole package, doesn't she? Because at this point, she is going to be one of the wealthy, prestigious women in the entire area because she controls a whole lot of water. And when you control the water, you control the crops and the productivity and everything that goes with it. And now you have a list of names that we're going to call on nobody to pronounce because he's got the rest of the chapter. Kent.
It's fair to point out that if it looks like she got her husband in the lottery, you know, you go on to the next book. Israel had peace for 40 years because he was a sound judge.
Yeah.
And he wound up being the guy in
Yeah.
that area.
Yeah.
And not just the cattle boss or something. He was God's man for
Right.
the time.
Yeah. So you see a package. That's why it's so much fun to interrelate Judges with what's going on here, because a lot of the people mentioned in Joshua surface in Judges in a completely different or added to capacity that makes a world of difference. It's a lot of fun. It really is. So you've got a ton of names in here. Wow, I wouldn't, yeah, some of these are just terrific. They are. You looking for third, fourth, fifth, and sixth middle names for your kids and grandkids? You can make some suggestions here on some of these. You're probably not going to have any kid named anything like this, okay? Marvin, Jatter, Socketh, Dana, Kerjasan, something or other, yeah, that would be a fantastic middle name. It really would. Okay. Chapter 16 then begins. Well, now there's one glitch that we have to kind of be honest and cover here a little bit, and that is the very last verse. And this one is a troublesome item for Israel in its conquering the land. Okay. As for the Jebusites, now notably, these are the people in control of the city of Jerusalem at that point in history. Okay. The children of Judah could not drive them out. And at the time of the writing of the book of Joshua, the Jebusites were still there. Why couldn't they drive them out? Why not?
Because they weren't doing it all the way. They were compromised.
Yeah.
Suppose it comes down to a lack of faith and laziness.
What had God's promise been when he said, you don't have to worry about whether they're giants or not? I said, I'll go before you and I will drive them out. Okay? But, you kind of have to come to the conclusion that you have here a lack of faith or you have political expediency, which you see some of that here in the next chapter or two. In other words, compromise. Okay? We know how it goes, right? We see it all the time, even in our current culture, for the good of the people. That's what Mao said. That's what Stalin said. But we will disregard that. It's real easy to say, well, we don't want to subject our people to additional warfare. We know God said, drive them all out. But, we've been fighting for a long time now, and, we might have some additional young men die in the battles, and we can just kind of wall them off, put them over there, and leave them there. And in some cases, we're going to force them to pay tribute. We've already seen that some of them were made to carry water and cut wood for the children of Israel. Yeah, but 100 years or 200 years down the road, these people became a real thorn in the side of Israel. They really did. Whether it was the Amalekites, Jebusites here, or whoever, I don't know. We don't really have a book, chapter, and verse that nails it down in so many words. But yet it seems that you either have a lack of faith, outright disobedience, or some type of justification due to compromise. You know, it's a, let's find a way that we can all just live together. God had said there is no living together. You live with those people, they're going to bring their idols right into your household, and it's going to corrupt you. And you're going to lose my blessing when you follow their idolatrous practices. And Israel somehow, don't blame Israel too much, we see it happening in Christianity all the time, says, I can go halfway into the world system. Okay? I mean, I can keep one foot in the pagan ideas and philosophies of the world, and so long as I show up faithfully at church every Christmas and Easter, you know, I can handle almost everything because I'm a good Christian, you know, and I can hold, they're not going to taint me. I'm going to be able to withhold it. Well, one thing that you learn is what this generation compromises on, the next generation accepts as normal, and the third generation promotes it. Don't think so? Look at homosexuality and where it's come from in the last 50 or 60 years in this country. Now, when I was growing up, that was literally a dirty word. That was not something that you wanted to be known as, you know, for your gender preference, sexual this or that or the next thing. And today, you've got gay pride marches where they're totally endorsed, you know. Wow, doesn't take too long. Kristen.
I remember when you would actually have preachers preaching on that. I do believe it's in Matthew. You would actually have preachers preaching on the sin of homosexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you never hear a peep out of preachers about it. You even have gay preachers and so on.
Yeah.
And the other day I talked to my half-sister, and she actually told me that the King James Bible, now this is all her talking, her opinion. The King James Bible, because King James himself was a homophobe, he had that put in the book.
Ah.
And it's so funny because she said, you know, that verse doesn't really mean men shall not lay with men, but men shall not lay with little boys. And I'm like, it's still male and male and male, you know, not supposed to do that.
Yeah, whether it's a pedophile problem or whether it's you know, the maturity of grown people is not the
Still
point.
the same
is it?
thing. You're
Yeah.
not supposed to do
Yeah.
with the same sex.
Yeah.
But now you have all these people
Well,
who ignore it.
redefine things, right? Redefine things.
I thought it was
That's what
bad.
you do. You put different definitions and you come up with explanations that say this is a cultural issue. That's always a great one. Yeah, it's a way you can squirm out of almost anything, right? You know, so yeah, this is, you know, I continue to be impressed by 3,000 years ago, Solomon writing the book of Ecclesiastes, saying there's nothing new under the sun. You know, and if you want vexation of spirit, you know, just try messing with mankind without God in the picture, and you will be totally frustrated because mankind is going to say that good is evil and evil is good. And they're going to redefine the terms. You know, and that's exactly what they've done and are continuing to do so, even in our own culture as we speak. So, you know, these things may have all contributed, you know, because the heart of mankind is wicked and evil above all things. Mankind's heart hasn't changed now for, you know, what, 3,400 years or 3,300, whatever it is since this was written. It's probably not likely to in the next 50 either, by the way. So when you get to chapter 16, you have the children of Joseph. Now, you remember you've got two. You know, it's always kind of fun to talk about the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? Because by the time you get to the 12 tribes of Israel, you actually have 11 tribes, which become 13 tribes, which never wind up being 12 tribes. And then you get to the book of Revelation, and it mentions a couple of different lists of different names that have to do with which ones are included in which list. And by the way, you can miss the whole point and become confused. Yes, Originally, there were 12 sons of Judah that he was renamed Israel, so they became the 12 sons, the 12 tribes of Israel, okay? But that is a title for national Israel, okay? That's a title for national Israel. When today, even in New Testament times, when Jesus was there, when they talked about the 12 tribes of Israel, all the tribes, they were talking about the nation of Israel, inclusive. You know, whether you subtract Joseph and add Manasseh and Ephraim, that comes to 13, guys, any way you look at it. But the 13 is always referred to as 12. Okay? Yeah. It's just it's a label. It's a something that you attach to the national identity of Israel. Don't get bogged down in the numerical aspects of it. Okay, so he gives the borders of these for the tribe. He gives the first few verses talk about the kids of Joseph. Beginning in verse 5, he talks about Ephraim, and Ephraim once again. When you get to the end of the chapter, it says that they did not drive out the Canaanites that dwell in Gezer. Okay. But the Canaanites dwell among the Ephraimites unto this day and serve under tribute. The difficulty with compromise should be obvious to all of us, and I'm not saying there isn't a place to sit down and talk through issues, on a human basis, but God had given definitive commands as to what they were to do. You either drive them out or kill them all. Okay? That's not hard to understand what God's directive was. If they won't flee before you, kill them. Okay? Because you go in with them, you hang up with them, you hang around with them, generations pass, and as Tim brought out this morning in Sunday school, in no time at all you have idolatry that erupts, because it's just easier to let things slide, and after all, it's not that big of a deal. You got a couple of groves up there, a little altar to Baal. It's over in the corner. We've still got 17 altars to God, so one little altar to Baal isn't a big deal. And now it's 2, and now it's 7, and pretty soon the Baal worshipers are voting their people in and voting the Israelites out, and now you no longer have any worship, okay? Because Baal has taken over. Such goes spiritual compromise, everything that goes with it. Chapter 17 picks up with the other son of Joseph. And by the way, at this point, when you start doing the chronology, you're talking about grandkids and even great-grandkids. Okay, there's been enough decades that have passed, 40 years in the wilderness, and now we're rolling into, so you're looking at least grandkids, or little guys, even great grandkids. Okay, it talks about one of the problems, and here's one of these little cameo things. Okay, when chapter 17 opens, everything seems normative as far as a description of the land and the people of this and that. It says, but in verse 3, there was this unpronounceable name that the guy had a son, the son of Gilead, and it gives kind of the genealogy, a great-grandson, I think it is. But the problem is there were no sons in that line of descent. It's the ladies will, I'm sure, all agree that having nothing but children, or nothing but female children, is some type of genetic defect, right? And some of you women just aren't alive out there. That's all. There's no pulses out there now, boy. I tell you. Where's Corey when I need her? She went. Yeah, she's out walking Jane out there. Anyway, she'd never let me get by with that. Okay. But he had 5 daughters. They're listed by name there in verse 3. And they came to Eleazar the priest before Joshua the son of Nun, before the leaders, princes, that word means leaders, and said, the Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance among our brethren. Therefore, according to the commandment of the Lord, he gave them an inheritance among the brethren. Now, when you go back, you can research this. Numbers 27, for instance, is where it's recorded, and then you can go back to, there you go. I think that's right, Numbers 27. And you find that God had provided for families that didn't have any male offspring when it came to the land's inheritance. The point being that the land was partitioned divinely, and it is secured that way perpetually. And just because male-female offspring might have problems getting the right, hereditary dispersal, isn't going to thwart God's plan for the dispersion of the land. So the land goes to these women and their households, and they inherit. So the rest of Manasseh's sons had the land of Gilead. See how God provides for that? There isn't anything that escapes. Through when God plans it out, okay, he's got it pretty well nailed down, because you know how lawyers can get. They're looking for a loophole, an escape clause, or clumsy wording in a contract where they can, throw the baby out the window with the bathwater. God doesn't provide any loopholes. You dig through it, and he's got it nailed down. He really does. Either by principle or in particular precept, the teaching of it, all the way through. Okay. Verse 7 then goes on and talks about the actual geographical layout of the land of Manasseh. And, here's one of those uncute little human vignettes. Okay, beginning in verse 14, the children of Joseph spoke to Joshua whiningly. Okay, that's Roger's paraphrase. They were whining. We didn't get enough of the land. We didn't get the good stuff. Yeah. Okay, you get the idea, but that's pretty much what it is. Why have you given me but one lot and one portion for an inheritance? See, I am a great people, and the Lord has blessed us. And Joshua said, well, if you're a great people, go capture those guys over there that are resisting and take it away from them, because they're not supposed to be here anyway. In other words, go do what you're supposed to do to begin with, instead of whining about it being handed to you. Go be obedient and operative by faith in my command, and you will have more land. Okay? Well, did they? No. But that's another story, I suppose. So Joshua, it says, spoke to them. It says, you've got valleys of the Jezreel. You've got the Canaanites in the land. He says, go whip them. He said, take away their stuff. Kill them off. Take their houses, their cities, their chariots, their valleys, their fields. Yes, ma'am.
Every single chapter says, go get rid of them, and they don't go get rid of them.
And they don't do it, do they? That's a problem with obedience. Because oftentimes it's easier for the believer, okay, to figure out a compromise, to rationalize why I don't need to be obedient. I mean, obedience can mean sacrifice, it can mean effort, it can mean long-term commitment, and we look at that and say, wow, hand me the remote. I'll bet there's a movie on somewhere, and I'd rather just put my feet up and watch the movie than actually be committed in obedience. Yeah. Believers, we're talking about the nation of Israel here, just in a generic way, but God's people, I'll just put it that way, going down through. So you find here everything that goes with it. He said, and gives them the command, you want more land, go take what you're supposed to be doing anyway, and you will have more land. So how about that for a political solution by leadership? He says, well, do what you're supposed to do to begin with and quit your whining. Next. Wouldn't that be refreshing to have leadership like that? Huh? Yeah? Anyway, moving right along. Chapter 18.
Roger,
Yes, Kent.
It's interesting because we just looked at Judges 4. They're whining because the Canaanites have iron chariots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And God didn't have any trouble dealing with the iron chariots
Nope.
when Deborah and Barak were in charge.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. But it's a familiar and repetitive whine, isn't it? You know, almost at this point, almost 50 years earlier, this is the whine that the 10 spies brought out in their report after they'd gone through the promised land. They're bigger than us. They're great big guys, man. They're like giants. We're like grasshoppers. Quit your whining. If God be for us, who can be against us? Go do what God commands. You got faith or not? Yes, no. No. Well, so what happens? Well, you compromise and you rationalize over why you can be disobedient, because it's really a good thing, to be able to get along with these people that are going to completely inundate your nation with idolatry and ruin your entire culture. No, actually it's not, right? Tongue-in-cheek sarcasm. So thank you, Kent, for that. The remaining nation of Israel now moves. You may not pick this up initially at chapter 18 opens. The whole congregation of the children of Israel assembled together at Shiloh. This would have been a move of somewhere between 20 and 25 miles. Apparently, the remaining people were moved to become more centrally located for the remaining dispersion for the remaining tribes. So that's what you get. And there were, according to verse 2, there were 7 tribes that had yet to receive their inheritance. And you have a picture of the casting of lots in verse 6. The land is, and God here does something, and you're assuming it's God, but through Joshua, he's now apportioned, in essence, the southern and the eastern parts of the promised land. He's got all of the central and northern areas to disperse, and he has the tribes, the 7 remaining tribes, present delegates, and he puts together, in essence, a mapping team and sends them, and we don't know how long. I don't know whether, probably a few weeks, maybe several months, I don't know, where they went off up through, all the remaining designated geographical area, and they came up with geographical descriptions of 7 portions for the remaining 7 tribes. They described the lay of the land, they described where the boundaries would be, and they came up with this description, came back, handed them to Joshua, and Joshua said, okay, we'll put individually all 7 of the remaining ones in the pot. Here's the 7 remaining names of the 7 tribes, and here we go back to drawing by lots, and Asher gets this, and Naphtali gets this, and so on and so forth. So you kind of get the picture of what's going on. That's all described in verse 6 and following, except for the Levites. Okay? The Levites didn't get a portion. So you see, the 12 tribes that became 11 tribes, that became 13 tribes, are now back down to 12 tribes because the Levites didn't get a portion. So you can play that silly game all you want to. They are reserved for the priesthood, the direct ministry to God himself, and the temple becomes their inheritance. Okay? And they are going to be given certain cities. We'll talk about that in a moment. I think we can cover that in a few minutes. It's not really essential, but they cast lots. The men arose in verse 8 and went on their way. They came with the land descriptions and everything, and they all put the 7 parts when they got back. And again, we have no idea whether it's 3 days, 3 weeks, or 3 months. That they probably several weeks at least, because they had to travel by Shanksmere to get from all through the land, and record the descriptions and all the other stuff, this brook and that mountain and this here and that, you get the idea. It would have taken a little while for guys, primarily on foot, to be able to do this. Again, not really an issue, otherwise God would have recorded it for us, wouldn't it? Okay. In verse 11, the lot of the tribe of the children of Benjamin. You go back to drawing lots, Benjamin comes up, and he has got this description of land and everything that goes with it. Now, one of the interesting things is Benjamin, of course, wound up getting an apportionment that was kind of one of the few remaining southern chunks down by the tribe of Judah. Okay. It actually, if you look at a map, sometimes it's kind of interesting how it lays. So in verse 28, it says one of the cities. It gives a whole list of cities within the land of Benjamin, and verse 28 says Jerusalem was there. Okay. The Jerusalem then became one of the major cities of the Benjamite, even though at this time it's still being controlled by the Jebusites. Okay. So, hey, politics, nothing new, right? So 14 cities with their villages, the inheritance of Benjamin. Simeon comes up in chapter 19, and in verse 10, Zebulun comes up. In verse 17, Issachar comes up. The fifth lot, Asher, comes up in verse 24. In verse 32, you've got Naphtali comes up. And then the last one in verse 40, the children of Dan. Now, this is kind of think about if you're one of the tribe in the tribe of Dan. There's only one lot left, man. I mean, this is not, you look in the pot and there's one name, it says Dan, you look in the other pot and there's one description, and they know because everything else has already been given away. This is anticlimactic for Dan, isn't it? They pretty well figured out what they're going to get. Everything that goes with that. So verse 49 says, they made an end of dividing the land for inheritance of their coasts. And it was repeated at the end of verse 51. Okay. Now, the very last thing we want to cover a little bit here, and that is the cities of refuge. This ties in with the promises of the inheritance of the tribe of Levi. Okay. God is going to, and by the way, if you can, well, let's turn back there. Numbers chapter 35. Well, before you go there, go to Exodus 21. Exodus 21. Moses comes down with the Ten Commandments and starts reading out all of the stuff that's in the Mosaic Law to the nation of Israel. Somebody read verses 12 and 13. 21, 12 and 13.
He that smiteth a man so that he die shall be surely put to death. And if a man lie not in wait, but God deliver him into his hand, then I will appoint you a place where he shall flee.
Okay. Now, there's two types of homicide described there, right? You do realize what the act homicide we often think of as murder. No, murder is a category of homicide. Homicide simply means that there is a death of a homo, a human being. Essentially, that's the way to remember it, okay? So accidental death is also a homicide. Here you have a description in verse 12 of murder, okay? Verse 13 is manslaughter. By the way, biblically, there's no such thing as first, second, and third degree murder or first, second, third, and etc. degrees of manslaughter. By the way, legally those vary from state to state to state. It can be kind of confusing. But God didn't do that. He said if there was intent, what we call premeditation, there was intent to do bodily harm that resulted in death, that's murder, pure and simple. If you were chopping wood, the head of your axe flew off and hit the guy you were with and he died from it, that's manslaughter, that's an accident. There is not all the baloney that our legal people have obfuscation. You know, happen to love that word. I really do. You know, it's but anyway, you can look it up sometime. So you have then, right in the Ten Commandments, so to speak, right in that area, you have God saying there's going to be, when homicide takes place, premeditated or accidental, there are going to be a place where people can flee. Okay? Now, definition of vendetta. Anybody?
Payback.
Payback? That's not bad. That's not bad. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. You kill one of mine, I kill one of yours. Think Hatfield and McCoy. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. You gun one of us down, we waylay and gun two of you down. You know, payback. Yeah, as Kathy puts it. That's not a bad way to put it. Okay, vendetta culturally was very seriously practiced during the Mideast, during this period of mankind's history, and it has been prevalent throughout most of the known world for all of mankind's history. Okay? Somebody comes in and kills somebody that's dear to you, you're going to go get them. You know? Now we've kind of put that, wrapped legalities of human law system around such things. You know, we pin stars on people to go get them for us, you know, and the court system, you know, to put them away for us, and the prison system to incarcerate them for us, you know, and all that other blather that's out there. But when you talk about the problem, you know, is murder is obviously one issue. It's the intent, okay? But accidental death, if you're talking about payback, you know, the hot blood of the moment might get somebody exercising payback before all the details come out. Okay? You know, so you can wind up with, in effect, people that didn't mean to do any harm getting killed because of vendetta by remaining family members, because they don't care. You know, John got killed, we're going to kill the guy who killed John. Doesn't make any difference if it was accidental or he said it was accidental. Well, God had a provision for all that, called the cities of refuge. In the book of Numbers, chapter 35, you get some of the particulars. We don't have time to go into them all, but you can make note of the reference. Must be beginning in about verse 6. Yeah. Among the cities which shall be given to the Levites, there will be 6 cities for refuge. Now the Levites are given 48 cities. Okay? Now don't think New York. You know, we're talking about, you know, villages, overgrown villages, at least initially. Some of them grew bigger, some of them didn't. But within that 48, you had 6 of these were appointed cities of refuge. By the way, these were pretty well equidistant. You had 3 on the west side of the Jordan. You had 3 on the east side of the Jordan. 2 were in the north, 2 in the middle, 2 in the south. Kind of equidistant. The reason for that was if somebody murdered somebody or there was a homicide, accidental or otherwise, he could claim sanctuary. Okay? But he had to get to the city before the relatives or the friends caught up with him. Okay? You know, Tim killed somebody, okay, that is near and dear to me, accidental or otherwise. Okay? He'd better get to a city of refuge before I catch up with him. Because legally, if I catch up with him, regardless of whether it's accidental or not, I have every legal right to take his head off and leave his body rotting on the side of the road. Okay? Just that simple. That was the way the law was written. So there was a real premium if there was a death for Tim to get to a city of refuge until the facts could be analyzed and the witnesses could be brought forth and said, it was accidental. And there was provided a cooling off period. Now the elders of each city had of these cities of refuge had the responsibility when somebody came to the gate, banged on the door, and said they're coming to get me, a man died, and I was involved, then they would do a quick little, summary type of examination, and they didn't even have to grant him in. If he didn't have a reasonable story, they just left him outside the gate until the relatives caught up and axed him to death. If he had a reasonable story, they would bring him in. You couldn't touch him. That was sanctuary. Then the elders of the city had the responsibility to bring in all the witnesses from all of the incident, and sit down and go through the evidence involved and come to a summary judgment. Now, if it was accidental, then the man could remain in one of those sanctuary cities, and he had have his life secure. Yes.
There never was a time that he could leave the city.
He could leave it at the death of the high priest, okay, which seems kind of arbitrary for us. It really made you hope that if you had to claim sanctuary, you hoped that it was an old doddering high priest, so you didn't have to stay there for too long. If it was a young high priest, you may be there for 20 years or more. Realistically, you did not have young high priests. Okay, most of the high priests were probably in their 60s or 70s before they ever stepped into that office. Most of them didn't last more than 8 to 10 years at the most. Yes?
Then the high priest better hope that guy wasn't a serial killer.
Maybe, but the text doesn't go into that, but you kind of get the idea. Yeah, so you kind of get the picture of what's going on here. Now, what happens if the court found out that it was premeditated? Well, essentially, they just pitched the guy back over to the wall and gave him back to the crew that was out there going, oh, here he comes, good deal. And they finished the problem right there, and, tanned his hide when he died, Clyde, and that's it, hanging on the shed, right? You don't know that one, you've missed a classic. Anyway, you get the idea. Now, here's one of the significant things. There were no prisons. Jails, as we understand them, did not exist until the Romans came on the scene. The Babylonians didn't fool with jails. Okay? The Babylonians, you disagreed with them, they just stuck a spear through you and hung your carcass on the city wall. Okay? It wasn't until the Romans came by that they began jailing people as a cultural norm. Okay? And of course, we've taken the whole jail prison thing to a high art form, at taxpayer expense, and have committed all kinds of nonsense and tomfoolery and everything that goes with it. So you have these cities of refuge, and it is described here both in Numbers and then back for now as we finish here in the book of Joshua. Verse 3, the slayer that kills a person unawares and unwittingly may flee there, and it will be a refuge from the avenger of blood. Avenger of blood, you're talking about vendetta. Okay? Wow, there are stories especially flowing out of the Mediterranean states, over the last, up until modern times, I'll put it that way. You had vendetta feuds that went on for centuries that made the Hatfields and McCoys look like kindergarten people. Ambushes and all kinds, and they killed women, kids, grandparents, exterminated whole families, because somebody had run over a chicken, with a cart in the middle of the road, and some family would wipe out whoever owned the chicken. This type of stuff just flared out of control, everything that went with it. Well, the idea was a cooling off period to find out exactly what the facts were, and was the homicide murder or was it manslaughter? Okay? So that you can go through this, and it emphasizes once again the unwittingly in verse 5, and that he would dwell in the city if he was considered, innocent of premeditated murder. By the way, biblically, that's the only kind there is. Okay? Is premeditated. There is no other category, I've already mentioned. There is no type 2, 3, or 4, let alone levels. Murder, by definition, is premeditated. You have decided ahead of time to do harm to another human being up to and including causing their death. That's murder. That's premeditated. That's what murder is. It's premeditated. Okay? You make up your mind ahead of time and then you go, cause somebody harm. He's going to stay there until the high priest again, croaks. We've already talked about that. It might be a few months, might be a few years, could be, longer than that. And you think, well, isn't that kind of capricious? Isn't that kind of arbitrary? And I'm going to say that's what God did. There's no explanation for it according to Western philosophical reasoning. That's just the way God did it. And it gives a list of the cities of where they are and everything that goes with it. Okay? So that, you can study out the cities of refuge. But that was the extent of what Israel utilized for what today we would call some type of a prison system. This is not even a prison system. It is a sanctuary system for people that did not intend to cause another human being's death, but it was an accident. And to keep this from developing into a family blood feud through generations, God appointed this particular system. Yes, ma'am.
We have sanctuary cities to this day, San Francisco, for instance, and it doesn't make any difference what type of criminal they protect them.
Yeah, you have all kinds of politicization. People doing political nonsense that makes no sense, frankly, on any type of a common sense basis. But that's what politics is mostly about, anyway. No offense, Julie.
It's true.
There's almost nothing that God lays down that people don't mess up. Instead of sanctuary cities being what they were intended, we now have a prison system which cultivates well-educated criminals.
Well-educated criminals.
And we have a mess because we can't do this. This doesn't make sense. This is old-fashioned. It's also justice, which is what we're coming up so short on.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we have a tremendous ability as human beings because we're running from God, because we don't want to operate under God's program. We want to do our thing our way. Then we are heading the other direction. So we find ourselves inventing our own system rather than being obedient to God's system. And we have messes.
Roger,
Yes.
it never ceases to